The first sound you ever heard was your mother's breath. Sharp, then low, then fading. She had labored all night beneath the beams of a thatched cottage, groaning through the winter wind, her fingers digging into the straw mattress as if she could claw herself back from the edge. The midwife muttered prayers under her breath, fingers slick with blood, while your father paced the yard like a ghost. When the cry came, your sit rose into the rafters like a challenge. You were a girl, no horn blew. No name was shouted to the skies. Your mother survived, just she would never bear another. And you were wrapped in an old woolen cloth and pressed to her chest. Your name whispered only once, and not again for some time. You would learn the rules slowly, by silence mostly. Your name is Eleanor, though few will call you that with any care. To most, you will be the girl, the daughter, the helping hands, the mouth to feed the burden, or later the womb. But here at the start, you are simply small pink alive and shivering. The hearth crackles beside you. The air smells of wood smoke and ash, with a hint of old milk and damp that never quite leaves. Your world is tiny wattle and daub walls, smoke-darkened beams, a narrow cot, and your mother's chest. The ceiling is low, the expectations lower. But your heartbeat is steady, you are here. And for now that is enough. You grow by inches. The milestones are simple and unmarked, your first steps on packed earth. Your first words murmured more to the hens than to your father. By age 5, your hands know how to twist flax. By 7, you can skin a rabbit with surprising neatness. You don't remember being taught. You only remember doing because everyone does. The line between girlhood and usefulness is not sharp. It blurs like breath on a cold window. There are no dolls save for a carved bit of driftwood your uncle gave you once, shaped like a woman with no face. You carry her in your apron, whispering secrets to the smooth grain as you work. She doesn't speak back, but that is safer. Your mother is quiet, not unkind, but frayed. Her hands are always moving. She wakes before the sun and sleeps with one eye open. Her life is a list of tasks, none of them finished. She shows you how to fold cloth, tend the garden, keep sourdough alive through the winter. She warns you not to speak too loud, not to sit with your knees wide, not to answer questions too quickly. You're not a boy, she reminds you, not cruelly, just plainly, as though it's something the world might forget and then punish you for. You do not yet know what you are meant to be, only what you must not. There are other girls in the village, but you are not always allowed to play. When you do, it's with boundaries. No climbing, no chasing, no muddying your skirts. Sometimes you sneak off with Matilda, the baker's niece, and you dare each other to touch the stone of the church wall, cold and damp, sacred and watching. She tells you the saints see everything. You wonder if they saw your father strike your brother last week and say nothing. Church is every week and sometimes more. You sit beside your mother on the cold bench, your head covered with a rough linen veil that tickles your ears. The priest speaks in Latin. You do not understand the words, but you understand the tone. You are taught that Eve brought sin into the world, that the pain in your mother's face is holy, that obedience is virtue and curiosity a sin best plucked early. You pray, you kneel, you watch. When the sermon ends, you carry a basket of dried herbs to the steps as offering. Your mother won't waste good bread. There is little time for dreams. When the chores are done, you sleep, not deeply. The thatch above your bed rustles with mice. Your blanket smells of lanolin and smoke. Your feet are always cold, but your mind wanders. You think about the lady in the manor house, how her hands are pale, how she walks with her chin high, how her shoes are red. You once saw her in the market and she didn't look at anyone. You wonder what her bed smells like. You wonder if her feet are ever cold. You wonder if she's ever skinned a rabbit. You bleed for the first time on a spring morning just after your 12th birthday. You are helping your mother beat the winter damp from the bedding when you feel it warm, unwelcome, final. She sees the stain before you do. There are no celebrations, only a long look, a quiet breath, and then you'll need to be careful now. She gives you a rag and shows you how to tie it. You nod, but something in you tightens. Not pain, not yet. Just the sense that some door has closed behind you, and no one will explain what lies ahead. You are 12 years old. You know how to sew a seam that doesn't fray. You can name 40 herbs by scent alone. You can twist a chicken's neck without flinching. You can keep your eyes down, your mouth shut, your hands busy. You are by all accounts a good girl, and that in this world is more than enough. It is also, though you don't know it yet, the start of everything. Your mother doesn't say it aloud, not yet, but her eyes shift when men pass by the gate now. Her conversation with the baker's wife lingers a little longer when they speak of sons. And when the tanner's boy glances at you over the market stall, ruddy-cheeked teeth like cracked stone, your mother doesn't scold. She watches. You are barely 13, but the village knows what that means. Your blood has come. Your hands are strong. Your hips, they say, will widen, which means you are ready to be traded. Not for coin, not in your case, but for favor or alliance or the slow barter of survival. Marriage is not a romance. It's a bargain. There is no moment when they ask you what you want. No invitation to dream. Your mother tells you the tanner's son is steady, that his family has a good hearth and fat hens, that he can read numbers. You try to picture your life by his fire, but all you see is blood-stained aprons and stiff leather fumes. Still you nod, because you must. Because to refuse is to risk being thought difficult. And a difficult girl quickly becomes an unmarried woman. And an unmarried woman, they whisper, is no one. The betrothal comes quietly. There is no ring, only a nod. A few words exchanged over salted fish and weak ale. The priest is informed. The neighbors are told. You are to be his by midsummer. You feel the air shift around you. You are no longer a girl. You are something half-claimed. There is preparation to be done. Your mother teaches you how to wash his tunics in river water without stiffening the wool. She shows you how to knead bread the way men like, thick at the edges, soft at the center. She hands you a small pot of dried lavender and tells you quietly, put it under the sheets. It helps the scent. You do not ask what scent. You do not need to. One night you ask her if she loved your father. She laughs gently, sadly. Love is for saints and songbirds, Eleanor, she says, not for women with children to feed. She stirs the pot and doesn't look at you. You never ask again. The tanner's son visits once before the wedding. He brings you a comb wooden roughly carved. You thank him. He doesn't touch you, but his eyes linger longer than they used to. He says he's glad your hair is thick. Good sign, he mutters. You smile because you're meant to. Because your mother is watching from the doorway. Because you've practiced it in the mirror. But something in your stomach curls like a sprouting root, unsure whether it seeks the sun or the dark. The wedding day is neither grand nor grim, just another village morning tinged with expectation and ale. You wear a linen shift, freshly scrubbed, and a borrowed girdle of red thread around your waist. Your hair is loose as custom dictates. Your hands tremble. The priest speaks quickly, more interested in the bread cooling on the table than in your trembling vows. You say, I do. So does he. And then it's done. You are no longer Eleanor, daughter of Godric. You are wife, belonging to another. In law, in body, in future. That night he takes you, not roughly, not cruelly, just without question, as is his right. Your mother told you it would hurt. She was not wrong. The lavender does little. You do not cry. You do not speak. You stare at the beams above and count the knots in the wood. You think of the driftwood doll you left behind in your old cot. You think of river reeds. You think of nothing at all. The next morning you bleed again. Your mother sees the stain and nods with grim relief. He will not send you back. You are his now, wholly, and yet the days after are not so terrible. He is not unkind. He brings you a hot stone for your feet once after you've been in the stream too long. He asks for stew, not roast, and says you make it well. He doesn't strike you, though he could. You learn his patterns, when to speak, when to smile, when to touch. It is not love, but it is livable, and in this world that is more than many have. You do not mourn the girl you were. You fold her away like a summer-dressed familiar no longer needed. You begin to speak less and carry more. Your hands grow calloused. Your eyes learn to scan the skies for rain. You discover that some silences are safe and some are dangerous. You learn that a woman's worth is often measured in the smoothness of her tone and the cleanliness of her floor. You learn. You endure. You become. And then one morning your stomach turns, not with illness, but with certainty. A new seed has taken root, and with it a new chapter, but not yours. Not really, for you are now both wife and soon mother. The change is subtle at first, a missed bleed, a morning's nausea, a faint ache in the hips as you bend to pull turnips from the cold ground. You say nothing, not yet. You wait, watch, measure your breath, but you already know. Women know. The signs are written into your body like an old psalm, repeated, reshaped, unforgotten. You are with child. You tell him after supper as he chews on the heel of bread. He blinks once, twice, then nods. He doesn't smile exactly, but there's something in his face that shifts like a stone rolled just enough to let moss grow. A son, perhaps, he says. You nod too, but you're not thinking of sons. You're thinking of your mothers, breath strained and fading. You're thinking of your sisters stillborn, the one buried without a name in the hedgerow behind the chapel. You're thinking of blood on linen, of screams of silence. But you smile, because you must. Because this is joy, isn't it? The midwife comes on the full moon to lay her hands on your belly. Her name is Heled. She smells of cloves and damp wool. Her fingers are cold but certain. She nods after a long pause and says, "It's holding firm." You eat well, girl. You nod again, though you haven't eaten much. She gives you a bundle of herbs and warns you off walking uphill too often. She tells you to keep your belly warm and your worries mild. You feel it move by Candlemas, she says. That'll be the quickening. She leaves you a root charm to tie under your shift and tells you not to sleep with cats in the bed. You didn't know you shouldn't. You do now. The days pass like slow water. You do less work, but not none. No one rests entirely, not for something as common as a pregnancy. You still fetch wood, scrub hearthstone, spin flax. You cook, you mend, you rise early. But now your hands rest on your belly when you pause. Now the village women look at you with quiet calculation. How wide your hips, how tired your eyes, how full your breasts. You've become something else. Not just a woman, a vessel, a threshold, a walking mystery of blood and breath and fate. And then one morning while kneading dough you feel it, like a ripple inside, like a flutter, a fish turning beneath still water. You stop. You press your hand to your belly. It happens again. Quick, then still. You say nothing at first. But something rises in your throat, a sound too small to be joy, too big to be silence. You laugh. Not loud, not long, just enough to feel the moment stretch and crack open like a sun-warmed seed. The baby has moved. It is real. You are not just hoping anymore. You are becoming. You tell him that night. He nods again, then places his hand awkwardly where you point. The child does not stir for him. He shrugs. It's early yet. But for you, everything is already changing. You begin to dream, strange dreams, of wolves pacing the door, of rivers running red, of a great hand reaching from the sky, pressing down on your belly like the weight of God. You wake sweating throat, dry breath, shallow. The priest says dreams are tricks of the devil. Your mother says they're warnings. The midwife says it's the womb speaking. You don't know who to believe, but the dreams keep coming. By your 5th month, your back aches from rising. By your 6th, your ankles swell, your appetite returns, and your husband says you've rounded out like a barley loaf. You laugh though it stings. The women in the village begin to bring things. An old birthing sheet, a wooden spoon polished smooth, a carved cross once used by a grandmother long buried. Each object carries the weight of survival. And something else, a silent sisterhood passed down in cloth and gesture, not word. The 7th month is hardest. The weather shifts. The damp settles in the walls. You feel heavy and hollow all at once. Your belly stretches taut. Your lungs feel smaller. You wake with cramps. Sleep in bursts. Eat salt and root. Sometimes you press your hands low and whisper to the child inside. Stay, you say. Wait. You do not know if it hears you, but you speak all the same. Because the body may carry, but it is the spirit that waits. Heled visits again this time with a bundle of willow bark and a small jug of mallow oil. She lays a hand on your womb and hums a low note you do not recognize. Soon she says, you nod. You feel it too. Something is beginning, and something some part of you is ending. One night you bleed a little. Not enough to panic, but enough to change the air in the room. You sit quietly by the fire, a cloth between your legs while your husband sleeps unaware. And you whisper to the child again. Stay, you say. Stay a little longer. And for now it does. It begins before dawn. You wake with a weight in your belly heavier than any you felt before. Not pain, not yet. Just pressure. Like the earth itself has settled on your hips. You roll onto your side and breathe slowly, trying not to disturb the sleeping form beside you. Outside, the sky is still black, the fire long since gone to ash. The thatch above your bed whispers faintly in the cold wind. Then it comes again, this time lower, sharper, a pull deep as marrow. You press your hand to your stomach and feel the skin stretch taut beneath your palm. The child is coming. You rouse him with a word. He blinks confused. Then his eyes widen, and without a word he pulls on his boots and disappears into the night to fetch Heled. You are alone. Just you, the fireless hearth, and the beating ancient rhythm of your own body. By the time they return, you are kneeling on the rushes. Breath shallow, fingers digging into the edge of the cot. Heled does not ask questions. She lays her tools out on a cloth, a clean knife thread, a pot of lard dried sage. She helps you strip to your shift and binds your hair back with a leather thong. Listen to me now, she says, eyes steady. You've crossed the threshold. This is your road. No one else can walk it for you. You nod. But you're already beyond nodding. Already deep in the swell and ebb, already caught in the tide. The pains come regular now, waves of force that rise through your spine and clutch your belly like a vice. You cry out once, then bite your tongue. Heled smiles not unkindly. That's it, let the fire take you. She feeds the brazier. The scent of thyme and damp wool fills the room. Outside, someone is whispering prayers. Your mother, perhaps. You can't tell. All sound is distant now. Even your own voice. Hours pass. Time dissolves. The walls blur. You forget where you are. You forget who you are. You are not Eleanor now. Not wife, not daughter. You are simply woman. The gate. The passage. The living answer to a question older than kingdoms. The pain becomes something else. Not sharp, but enormous. Like your bones are cracking open from the inside. Heled checks the progress. She nods. says things you don't quite hear, then places her hands on your thighs. Push now, she says. So you do. You bear down with every fiber in your body. Your mouth opens, but no sound comes out. Only effort. Only fire. Only the tearing edge of the world. There is blood. You know this. You smell it, coppery thick. You feel something give. Then another wave. Another push. Another scream, this one yours. Then silence. And then suddenly sound. A cry. High, wet, sharp. The kind of sound that splits time in two. Before, after. You collapse back onto the pallet, chest heaving. Your eyes fill with tears, though you do not sob. Heled holds up a slippery, screaming bundle. A girl, she says. You nod. Too tired to speak. Too hollow to hope. But deep inside something blooms. Not joy exactly, but something like it. Something warmer than blood. Older than sorrow. The child is cleaned. Wrapped. Placed at your breast. She finds the nipple with instinct latches clumsily. You stare at her flushed, damp, blinking at nothing. So small. So loud. So alive. You bleed still. More than you expected. Heled places a cloth beneath you, muttering prayers to Saint Margaret. She mixes herbs into water and presses them to your lips. You're not done yet, she says. Birth is only the gate. You must walk the path now. You nod. The pain is not over, but it has changed. It is no longer the fire. It is the ash. Your mother comes in with broth. Your husband peeks through the curtain, awkward and pale. He says nothing, but his eyes land on the child. A daughter. You watch the words settle in his throat. Not disappointment. Not quite. Just a pause. Then he nods once and leaves. You rest for 3 days. Your body aches in places you didn't know could ache. You pass blood. You weep for no reason. You stare at the wall for hours. Your daughter sleeps beside you in a wooden box lined with straw and cloth. You have no name for her yet. Only a song you hum under your breath. A lullaby your mother once sang to you. The tune comes back slowly, like memory rising through fog. On the 4th day you rise, not because you're ready, but because someone must stoke the fire. Someone must feed the chickens. Someone must carry the water. You were a girl, then a wife, now a mother, and the world expects you to wear each name without complaint. But inside something else stirs, not rebellion, not yet, just a quiet awareness that you have walked to the edge of life and returned. And no one saw it, not fully, not truly, not even the child you carried across the threshold. You tie your apron, step into the yard. The sky is grey, the mud cold beneath your bare feet, but your hands are steady. You've survived, and now, like every woman before you, you begin again. The days after birth are measured in milk, not in hours, not in seasons, not even in the tolling of the church bell, only in the swell of your breasts, the ache when the child cries the thin white trickle that stains your shift. You wake to her rooting blindly in the dark, her mouth open like a fledgling's. Your nipples are cracked, tender, burning where her gums rub raw. The midwife's salve helps a little, not enough. You feed her anyway, because that's what you are now. A source, a well, and if the well runs dry, so too will she. Milk and ash, that's the smell of you now. Smoke from the hearth that never goes cold and the faint sourness of your own body's work. You wash when you can, but water is heavy and time is short. There's always another chore before you. Another pot to stir, another floor to sweep, another basket to mend. Your husband returns to the tannery. He leaves before the sun rises, returns after it sets. His hands are stained with the same reek of hides he's always carried. He doesn't hold the baby, often says she's too small, too fragile, but you catch him looking sometimes, his eyes soft, almost uncertain. You wonder if anyone looked at you that way once. The baby sleeps in bursts. 2 hours here, an hour there. No pattern you can trust. When she sleeps, you work. When she wakes, you work differently. You learn to spin flax with her swaddled against your chest. You stir the stew with one hand while rocking her cradle with the other. You keep her warm with layers of wool and the heat of your own body. Winter creeps at the edges of the door. You pray it stays there. Your body is slower now. The bleeding has stopped mostly, but your hips still ache and your back feels as though someone tied a stone to your spine. Heled warned you this would happen, that the work of birth is not over when the child arrives, that it lingers in your bones, your muscles, your breath. Some women recover quickly, some never do. You try not to wonder which you'll be. The women in the village stop you in the lane now. They peer at the baby, lifting the edge of her blanket to see her face. Some smile, some frown as if measuring her worth in the set of her jaw or the shape of her ears. One old woman says she's got watcher's eyes, the kind that see what they shouldn't. You tuck the blanket back over her head and walk away quickly. Nights are the hardest. The world narrows to you, the child, and the low red glow of the hearth. Your husband snores, his back turned. The baby cries. You sway in the half dark, humming the tune you can never quite finish, your feet tracing the same worn circle on the rush-covered floor. The air smells of wood smoke and milk, your own skin faintly salty with sweat. Sometimes you wish for silence. Then she sleeps and you stand still in the dark, straining to hear the sound of her breath. Your mother visits once, bringing a cloth doll stuffed with straw and a pouch of dried chamomile. She watches you nurse by the fire, her face unreadable. You'll be tired for a long time, she says. You nod. You'll think you can't do it, but you will. You nod again. Then she leans closer, her voice low. Be careful with the priests, she says. They like to tell mothers how to raise their own. You don't ask what she means. You think you already know. The priest comes anyway. He blesses the child with holy water, mutters a prayer for her health, and reminds you to keep her modest even in infancy. She is a daughter of Eve, he says. Best to guide her nature early. You bow your head. You wonder if he said the same to the mother of a son. Your husband's mother arrives on the 7th Sunday after birth. She brings a jar of goose fat and a knitted cap. She inspects the baby as though she were a new calf, turning her this way and that, testing the strength of her grip. Shall do, she says at last, and sets her back in the cradle. She tells you to feed your husband more meat. He works hard, she says, as if you don't. When she leaves, the room feels lighter. Your body adjusts. Your milk evens out. Your hands learn the weight of her without looking. The ache in your hips dulls. But you are not the same woman who entered labor. Something of you was left behind in that room, in that night, in the moment between the scream and the silence. You cannot name it, but you feel the space it left, and you fill it with her. The baby smiles for the first time in the 2nd month. Not wind, not chance. A real smile aimed at your face. It's small, fleeting, but it's enough to crack something in you open. You smile back, and for a moment, just a moment, the weight of milk and ash lifts. You are still tired, still bound by the same endless tasks, but in that moment you feel it. The work is not only a burden, it is also a tether to her, to yourself, to the quiet, relentless miracle of survival. Winter comes in pieces, not a storm or a frost all at once, but a quiet claiming. First the ground stiffens, then the trees go bare, reluctant to drop their last curled leaves. Then one night, the wind changes and everything falls silent, truly silent. Even the birds give up. You and the child measure the days by firelight and breath, by how long it takes water to freeze in the pail, and how deep the snow settles at the edge of the yard. The air has a weight to it now. Cold that sits on your skin like damp cloth, seeping in until your bones seem to ache from within. You bundle her in wool layers upon layers until she is more cloth than flesh. She protests, red-faced and squealing, but you know better. Winter doesn't forgive softness. It slips in wherever it can, through the cracks in the shutter, through the soles of your worn shoes, through the space between heartbeats. The woman from 3 doors down. Aldith moves through the village like someone who's already buried a life and now walks only with the fragments. She keeps the fire going in her hearth at all hours, smoke curling into the pale sky. She comes by sometimes to share her coals when yours burn too low. She watches the baby closely, though she never reaches to hold her. You can't tell if it's fondness or fear. Your husband's hours grow longer as daylight shortens. The tannery does not sleep for the season. If anything, the work grows harder. Wet hides freeze stiff and must be thawed before they can be scraped. The stink of urine and lime water clings to him more sharply in the cold, making your eyes water when he comes through the door. Sometimes he brings scraps of leather, little offcuts too small to sell, and you sew them into crude mittens for the baby. They make her hands smell of the tannery too. Food is thin. The root cellar is nearly empty before February has even begun. The cabbage is limp, the onions sprouting pale threads, the salted pork harder than bone. You stretch meals with broth. You chew more slowly so you can give her your portion. She is still too young for much beyond your milk, but you dip cloth in warm stock and let her gum it, watching her eyes widen at the new taste. Nights are long. The wind scratches at the shutters like a restless animal. The snow glows faintly in the dark, reflecting whatever little moon there is. The fire becomes your clock. You wake when it dies down. You sleep when it burns steady. Some nights the baby wakes, screaming for no reason you can find. You pace the length of the floor with her in your arms, her heat pressed to your chest, whispering whatever comes to mind, snatches of prayer, half-remembered songs, promises you're not sure you believe yourself. The cold changes you. It doesn't just press against your skin, it settles deeper. In your joints, in your lungs, in the slow, dull ache at the base of your neck. You start to think of it not as weather, but as another presence in the room. Something that must be fed with firewood, bargained with through the right layers of cloth, endured with bowed head and set jaw. You remember your mother's words. Winter doesn't end, it releases you when it's ready. There are moments of stillness though, like when you wake before dawn and see frost etched into the window like lace, or when the baby laughs at the way your breath makes clouds in the air, or when Aldith comes by with a handful of dried thyme saying only, "For the stew," before leaving without a word. These moments don't warm you in the way fire does. They settle deeper in a place the cold can't touch. By late winter, the baby's cheeks are chapped, no matter how you wrap her. She has a cough some mornings, wet and low. You rub her chest with goose fat, just as your mother taught you, and keep her close. You tell yourself the cough will pass. You don't say the word fever aloud. Not here, not in this season. And then one afternoon, the wind changes again. It's subtle, more scent than sound. The air feels different, less sharp. You can smell the thaw in it, faint and far off, but real. The snow begins to soften at the edges, slumping into itself like an old man into sleep. Aldith says nothing, but you catch her standing in her doorway, a little longer than usual, her face turned toward the lighter sky. The baby stirs that night with restless kicks, as though she can feel it tooth shift the promise. You press your lips to her hair and breathe in the scent of wool milk and smoke. It's not warmth, not yet, but it's the beginning of release. It happens slowly then all at once. The snow doesn't vanish in a single night. It shrinks patch by patch, leaving behind slick earth and the smell of rot. Meltwater runs along the edges of the lane, trickling into ditches choked with last year's weeds. The world feels damp and raw like something half-woken. Your first true sign is the birds. You hear them before you see them, a thin, reedy call in the grey light of morning. You pause in your work to listen, your hands still damp from rinsing the night's soot from the hearthstones. The sound feels strange after so much silence, as though it's come from another world. The baby tilts her head at the noise, her brow furrowed, as if she's trying to remember something she's never known. Then come the colours, not bright, not yet. Just hints green under the brown, pale yellow at the tips of the willow. Moss fattening on the north sides of stones. The sky too changes, trading its iron grey shroud for a lighter veil that seems to let more air into your lungs. Spring means work, more work than winter in its own way. Your husband joins the men clearing the fields of debris stones, fallen branches, the carcasses of sheep that didn't survive the frost. You take the baby to the yard and begin your own tasks, mending the garden fence, turning the soil with the wooden spade, shaking out the rushes from the floor. Everything smells of wet earth. Everything sticks to your hands. Food loosens its hold on scarcity. Wild garlic pushes up through the thawed banks, sharp-scented and eager. Nettles follow their sting, a small price for the iron they promise. You gather what you can and boil it into soup, feeding the baby the thin broth with a carved spoon. She sputters at first, then swallows, then opens her mouth for more. You smile at her greed. It's a good sign. The baby changes with the season. Her hands are stronger now, her grip sure enough to tug your hair. She sits with support, watching the chickens scratch at the thawing ground. She babbles to herself in a rhythm you don't understand, though sometimes it sounds almost like song. You wrap her in fewer layers, now letting her feel the mild sun on her face. She blinks, startled at its brightness, and you remember her first winter, how the light never seemed to touch her. The village stirs too. Women shake out blankets in the lane, their chatter carrying on the wind. The smell of baking returns, yeast rising faster in the warmer air. Aldith sets pots of onion sets in the window to start, and you catch her humming a tune you think you recognize from childhood. The priest delivers his sermon outside for the first time in months, his voice loud enough to carry over the sound of a dog barking at a cart. He speaks of Lent, of repentance, of how the earth is reborn each year through God's mercy. You think of the winter and wonder how much of it was mercy and how much was simply endurance. One afternoon, as you dig in the garden, you unearth something, a shard of pottery, the rim of what was once a jug. You turn it over in your hand, feeling the smooth glaze under the dirt. It's not valuable, not even whole, but you keep it anyway, tucking it onto the windowsill. Somehow it feels like proof that things break, yes, but they can be found again. Spring brings its own dangers. The thaw releases sickness, the kind that creeps into the lungs and clogs the chest. Aldith warns you to keep the baby away from standing water, to boil anything that's been sitting in the barrel since winter. You listen. You've heard enough stories of children lost in the first warm months. You watch her closely for signs, the color of her lips, the heat of her skin, the sound of her breathing at night. So far she is well. One evening your husband comes home with a branch of hawthorn in bloom. He doesn't say why, just lays it on the table and goes to wash. You put it in the cracked jug by the bed, the white blossoms catching the last light of the day. Their scent is faint, but it fills the small room with something beyond warmth. Hope, perhaps. Or simply the promise that nothing stays frozen forever. The days grow longer. You find yourself awake before dawn, hearing the soft rustle of the wind in the budding hedges. The baby stirs beside you, rolling onto her side, her fist curled under her chin. Outside, the world is busy again, and for the first time in months, you feel that same busyness stirring in you. Not just survival, something more. The year turns, and with it comes colour. Deep, heavy green in the hedgerows. Gold in the wheat, though the heads are still soft. Wild flowers in every gap between stones spilling their petals over the lane. And in the middle of it all, rumour of the fair. You hear it first from Aldith, who leans over the garden fence one morning to tell you she's going. She says it the way some speak of going on pilgrimage, half excitement, half warning. The midsummer fair is not for the faint-hearted. Your husband confirms it that evening. Well, take the hides, he says, and you can see to the baby there. You almost laugh. See to the baby is what you do every day. But you don't correct him. You've not been beyond the village since before she was born. The thought makes your heart lift, even if only a little. The day itself is clear, hot enough to make the dust rise on the road. You dress the baby in her best shift white linen, still smelling faintly of lye, and bind a cloth bonnet under her chin. You wear your better gown, too patched though it is, and braid your hair to keep it off your neck. The walk is long, the air buzzing with insects. The baby drifts in and out of sleep against your chest, her breath dampening the cloth sling. You hear the fair before you see it. Voices first, dozens, then hundreds. Then the clatter of hooves, the bark of dogs, the cry of hawkers. Then you come over the rise, and it is all there at once. Tents in every coloured blue, striped. Stalls laden with goods, bolts of cloth. Baskets of dried fish, strings of onions, pewter cups catching the sun. The smell hits you in layers, roasting meat, wood, smoke, horse dung, and something sweet you can't name. Your husband peels away almost immediately, vanishing into the press of bodies with the hides over his shoulder. You are left with the baby and the fair. It is overwhelming. Everywhere you look, there's movement jugglers, tossing knives, children chasing each other between carts, women bargaining over ribbons. A man in a tall hat calls for wagers on a dice game. Another offers small cakes, dusted with something white sugar. You realize, though, you've only tasted it once before. You hover at the edge of a stall selling wooden toys. The carver, an old man with one cloudy eye, holds out a rattle shaped like a bird. The baby grabs it at once, shaking it until the little pebbles inside clack like teeth. You buy it with the single penny in your pouch. It feels like too much and not enough all at once. There are things here you've never seen. Glass beads the color of the sky. A mirror no bigger than your palm. Knives with handles carved like foxes and hares. The thought of owning any of them feels almost sinful, like wishing for the moon. And then there are the entertainers. A woman with bells on her ankles dances to the beat of a drum, her skirts swirling in the dust. A man swallows a length of steel as long as your arm. The crowd roars and you feel the baby flinch at the noise. You draw her closer, covering her ears. At midday, the priest gives his blessing over the fair from the steps of the chapel, warning against sin and excess in the same breath that he praises the feast of St. John. Some listen. Most are already turning back toward the stalls before he's finished. Aldith finds you there. her cheeks flushed from the sun and the cider she carries in a clay cup. "You've not been to the cloth merchant yet," she says, pulling you toward a tent. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of dye. You run your hand over a length of deep blue wool, softer than anything you own. The merchant names a price you could never pay. You smile and step back, pretending you hadn't wanted it at all. In the afternoon, the mood shifts. The crowds grow louder, the air thicker. Men stagger from the ale tent, their laughter edged with something sharper. Arguments spark over wages. A boy runs past you clutching an apple, two older men in pursuit. You decide it's time to find your husband. It takes nearly an hour. When you do, he's seated on an upturned barrel. The hide's long since sold a cup in his hand. He smiles when he sees you, his eyes soft from drink, and takes the baby in his arms. She studies his face as if she's not quite sure who he is. The walk home is slower. The sun sinks low, turning the dust in the air to gold. The baby sleeps again, her new rattle clutched in her fist. You feel the day in your bones. Heat, noise, color, all layered over the steady weight of her against you. Back in the village, the silence feels strange, almost like the fair was a dream. But the rattle is real, and tomorrow so is the work. It begins as a whisper. You hear it from the old woman who sells eggs, something about a boy down by the mill who hasn't risen from his bed in 2 days. His mother sent for the priest. The priest came back pale. You tell yourself it's nothing unusual. Fever comes every summer. The air is thick and still, the well water warm in the bucket by evening. But still there's a weight to the whispers. The next day you see Aldith in the lane. Her mouth is tight, and she carries no basket, which is unlike her. It's more than one now, she says without preamble. A girl from the weaver's house and the cooper's wife. You glance down at the baby in your arms, suddenly conscious of her warm breath against your skin. Best keep her close, Aldith adds, and keep to boiled water. You try to believe it will stop there. But the lane tells its own stories. A shutter left closed in the heat of the day. A cart carrying straw that no one seems to want. The absence of certain voices at the well. You avoid the busiest hours, fetching water at dawn when the sun is still low. You scald the buckets before you fill them just in case. The baby watches you with solemn eyes, sensing perhaps the way you move faster than before. Your husband doesn't share your caution. It's just the heat, he says when you mention the sick. Folk get soft in warm weather. They'll be back in the field soon enough. But he doesn't stop you when you ask him to sleep with the shutters closed, or when you burn sage on the hearth. The first real sign comes 3 mornings later. A figure in the lane walking slowly, leaning on a stick. It's the cooper himself. His wife's headscarf hangs loose over her shoulders, and her eyes look past you without seeing. They pass without a word. You stand in the doorway long after they're gone, the baby tugging at your braid. Then the priest calls for prayers. Not the usual Sunday sermon, but a gathering in the square on a Wednesday, which is enough to tell you the rumors have hardened into truth. You stand at the edge of the crowd with the baby pressed to your chest. The priest's voice is steady, but his eyes flick to the side too often. God tests us, he says, but he does not abandon his flock. Keep to your prayers, keep to clean water, and be wary of strangers in the lane. You hear someone near you mutter, "What about our own?" But no one answers. The village changes quickly after that. Children are kept indoors. Bread is left on doorsteps instead of handed over. Aldith knots a strip of cloth across her face when she comes to the well, though she says it's more to keep out the smell than the sickness. The smell is new, a faint sweet rot at the edges of the lane growing stronger with each passing day. The baby seems well enough. She eats, She sleeps, she plays with the rattle from the fair. But you find yourself waking in the night to press your fingers to her cheek, to feel the coolness of her skin, to watch the small rise and fall of her breath. You keep the fire going, even in the heat, telling yourself it drives away the damp air. You hang sprigs of rosemary over the cradle. You wash her hands with boiled water after she touches anything outside. You've never been this careful before, and still the sickness creeps closer. Aldith's cousin is taken ill. She tells you this while standing a full 6 paces away, her voice muffled behind her cloth. It's the way of things she says, as though that explains anything. The priest's voice at Sunday Mass grows hoarse. You wonder if he is ill himself, but you say nothing. People cling to the idea that someone is safe. One evening, you hear the sound of a cart in the lane. When you go to the window, you see 2 men with their cloaks drawn high over their faces. They lift something heavy from a doorway and place it in the cart without looking around. The wheels creak as they move on. You close the shutters before they pass your house. After that, you stop lingering outside. The garden goes untended for days at a time. The laundry dries indoors, heavy and slow. The baby grows restless with the walls around her, but you keep her close, humming to her, even when you have no tune in your head. The air feels heavier now, not just with heat, but with something you can't name. A fever in the lane is not just an illness, it is a shadow. It stretches over every doorstep, whether the sickness has touched it or not. It makes people speak in half sentences, glance over their shoulders, step aside in the road. You live under it now, and you don't know how long it plans to stay. Silence feels different now. It used to be a choice, a stolen hour before dawn, a moment between chores, a lull in the baby's cries. Now it's something imposed, heavy, pervasive. The village is quieter than you've ever known it. Even the dogs have stopped barking. You notice it first in the mornings. No clatter from the smithy, no voices drifting from the well. Even the cockerel down by the mill has gone silent, as if sound itself has become a kind of risk. Your husband still goes to work, but the tannery has been slower, fewer hides, fewer men. When he returns, he scrapes his boots clean at the threshold without needing to be told. His eyes dart to the baby before anything else. Inside the house holds the quiet like breath. The rushes on the floor are fresh, but already beginning to smell faintly of damp. The fire burns low during the day to save fuel, but you light it higher at night for comfort as much as warmth. The baby plays on a blanket by the hearth, her rattle thudding softly against the boards. You find yourself talking more to her just to fill the air, telling her the names of things: spoon, cup, window, sky. She babbles back in her own language, and for a moment it feels almost normal, but the world outside presses in. You keep the shutters closed even in daylight. When you open them to air the room, you do it quickly, glancing at the lane to see who might be passing. Often, there's no one. When there is, it's rarely someone you know. Once you see a man you've never spoken to carrying a sack over his shoulder. He walks fast, his head down. You don't ask where he's going. Aldith comes less often. When she does, she stands in the doorway instead of stepping inside. She brings small things: a handful of dried beans, a strip of cloth for the baby's gown, but doesn't linger. You notice the lines around her eyes have deepened. "It's quieter up your way," she says once. "Down by the green you can hear the carts at night." You don't ask what's in the carts. Even the church is subdued. The priest still rings the bell, but the congregation is smaller now and the hymns sound thin. People sit farther apart, their voices low when they speak at all. The smell of incense hangs heavy, as though meant to mask something. You bring the baby, keeping her wrapped in her bonnet and shawl. She stares wide-eyed at the flicker of the candles, the shadows dancing along the stone walls. You pray, but not only for her. You pray for the quiet to lift. At home, you start small projects to keep your hands busy, mending the frayed edge of the blanket, shelling the last of the dried peas, sorting through the scraps of cloth in your work basket to see what might be made into something useful. But there are days when you simply sit by the window with the baby in your lap, watching the dust drift in the strip of light between the shutters. She claps her hands at it as if it's a game. You try to smile for her. The quiet has a sound of its own. The creak of the roof beams in the wind, the faint hiss of the fire, the occasional cough from the house next door, muffled through the wall. Your own breathing shallow without meaning to be. At night, it's different. The silence becomes sharper so that every noise, the snap of a log in the hearth, the shift of your husband in bed, feels too loud. You find yourself lying awake long after the baby has settled, listening for footsteps in the lane. One afternoon, while your husband is at work, you hear a knock. Not at your door, but next door's. It's a short, flat sound, then voice low, hurried. The scrape of wood against stone, a pause, then footsteps retreating. You wait until the lane is empty before opening the shutter. Next door's door is closed. It stays closed for 3 days. The baby is growing. Her legs are stronger now, kicking against your lap. She can pull herself to stand if she grips the edge of the bed. You encourage her, clapping softly so as not to startle her. You think of how strange it is that she has never known the village as it was before. To her, this quiet, this shuttered life is simply the world. You wonder what she will remember. The quiet house becomes its own kind of world. The walls hold in the warmth. The fires glow the small rituals you've made to mark the days. Bread on Mondays, laundry on Wednesdays. A longer story told to her on Sundays when the hours feel heavy. Beyond these walls, there are things you can't control. But inside, for now, there is order and breath. Harvest comes whether the village is ready or not. The wheat ripens in the fields, heavy-headed and golden, bending under its own weight. The barley turns from green to pale straw. Even the beans are swollen in their pods. The air is thick with the dry rustle of grain in the breeze. And yet there is no festival mood. In other years, this would be a time of bustle and laughter. Neighbors calling to one another across the fields, the smell of bread rising from every hearth. Children running ahead of the gleaners to gather what fell. There would be cider shared in the evening, songs rising into the warm dusk. This year there is none of that. The fields are worked in silence, save for the rasp of sickle on stalk. People move quickly, keeping distance, heads down. There are fewer hands to help, whole families gone, their cottages shuttered. You work alongside your husband in the strip allotted to your household. The baby is tied to your back, her small head nodding against your shoulder as she dozes. You bend and cut, the sun baking the back of your neck. By midday, sweat runs down your spine. You pause to drink from the flask you filled with boiled water, glancing toward the edge of the field where Aldith is working. She raises a hand in greeting, but does not come closer. Even friendship feels fragile this year. When the day's work is done, you carry your share of the sheaves back toward the village. The cart that would usually take several trips is only half full. Your husband says it's because the planting was late. You know it's because so few remain to bring it in. In the lane, you pass the old baker's cottage. The door is barred, the small garden overgrown. Last summer, the smell of his bread carried halfway to the green. Now it smells of nothing. The baby wakes as you set her down on the blanket inside her cheeks, flushed from the heat. You wipe her face with a damp cloth and offer her a cup of thin milk. She grips it with both hands, spilling a little down her front. Her hair has grown enough to curl at the ends. You smooth it back from her eyes and kiss the damp crown of her head. She smiles as if the world outside the walls has no claim on her. In the evenings, there is still work to be done, threshing, winnowing, storing. You and your husband spread the grain on a cloth in the yard, using a wooden flail to loosen the kernels from the chaff. The sound is rhythmic, almost soothing, and you fall into a pattern without speaking. Normally there would be music to this, the rhythm matched by a fiddler, someone stamping their foot in time. Tonight there is only the thump of the flail and the sigh of the wind. The priest speaks of gratitude in Sunday's sermon, reminding the villagers that the harvest is God's gift, even in lean years. His voice echoes in the half-empty nave. After the blessing, you linger in the porch for a moment, watching the others file out. Most do not stop to talk. Those who do speak keep their words short. It feels wrong, you think, for the end of the growing season to pass without joy. And yet joy feels like something that must be earned, and no one is certain they have earned it. Aldith comes to your door one evening with a basket of apples. From the old orchard, she says, before the crows get them. The fruit is small spotted, but the smell is sharp and clean. You give her a jar of beans in return. You stand together in the doorway for a moment, not speaking of the empty cottages, or the fact that the harvest feast has been quietly dropped from the calendar. One night after the baby has gone to sleep, you and your husband share a loaf baked from the new flour. The crust is crisp, the crumb warm and soft. You eat slowly, almost reverently. For a moment it feels like what harvest used to mean, full bellies, the comfort of food to last the winter. But in the stillness after, you remember that the stores will not be as full as other years. You push the thought aside. Winter will come soon enough. The harvest ends with no celebration. The fields stand bare under the shortening days. The last carts of grain roll into the village without music or shouting, only the creak of wheels. You sweep the floor, turn the grain in its bins, feed the baby her evening mash. Outside, the year is already leaning toward cold. You wake to a changed world. At first, you think it's just the light, thin, silvery, almost brittle, as it filters through the shutters. But when you open them, the air cuts your face, and the lane lies under a delicate crust of white. Every blade of grass, every thatch edge, every bare branch wears a lacework of ice. The baby stirs at the draft, pulling her hands into her gown. You dress her quickly, wrapping her in wool and fastening the bonnet under her chin. Her breath comes out in soft clouds, her eyes widening at the sight of the frost. You've seen this every year of your life, but through her gaze it feels like a marvel. Frost means change in the work. The ground hardens underfoot, and the earth in the garden no longer yields to the spade. Water in the bucket skims over with ice if left too long. You break it with the handle of the ladle before filling the baby's cup. Your husband mends the roof where a tile has slipped, his breath hanging in the air as he works. You hang the last of the onions from the beams, the smell sharp in the cool house. The air tastes cleaner though it bites. It carries sound differently, clearer, sharper. The call of a crow overhead seems to crack the silence like a stick. The clatter of the mill down the lane rings out against the hard ground. You take the baby to the edge of the green to feel the frost under her boots. She stamps and laughs at the crunch it makes, though her cheeks pink quickly from the cold. The first frost also means the first warnings. Aldith passes you at the well, her hands tucked into her sleeves. "It's come early," she says. nodding at the white grass. Best be ready. You know what she means. Once the frost sets in, the days can turn fast. One morning you're pulling the last turnips from the soil. The next you're snowed in burning fuel you thought would last months. You make lists in your head as you work. Check the store of beans. Bring in the last logs from the far pile. Mend the baby's heavier cloak before the real cold comes. Salt more pork if you can get it. The cold sharpens your movements, makes you quick without rushing. But it's not all worry. There's a strange comfort in the smell of wood smoke, curling from every chimney, in the way the whole village seems to huddle under the same pale sky. Doors close earlier. Lanterns flicker in the lanes at dusk. The sound of chopping wood carries from one end of the green to the other. The baby grows fascinated with the fire. You set a stool in front of the hearth and let her stand beside you as you stir the pot. She leans toward the glow, her eyes reflecting the light. You think often of winters past, of lying under layers so heavy you could barely move, of the frost furring the inside of the shutters, of the taste of bread so stale it had to be soaked in broth, of the way hunger could feel like cold in the belly. This winter might be easier than some, or harder. You won't know until you're deep in it. The priest's sermon the Sunday after the frost is about endurance. The earth sleeps, he says, and so must we learn to wait. His voice echoes in the chill nave, and you see your breath as you murmur the responses. On the way home, you notice the puddles at the edge of the lane have frozen in thin, perfect discs. The baby kicks one with her boot, shattering it like glass. That night, the frost thickens. It creeps up the doorframe, furs the pail by the hearth. The stars outside are so clear, they seem close enough to pluck from the sky. The cold wakes you in the dark hours, and you pull the blanket tighter around the baby, feeling the steady warmth of her small body. The house holds its own quiet, sealed against the wind. For now, the frost is only a warning. Winter has yet to show its full face. It begins overnight. When you wake, the light in the house is strange, soft, diffused, as though the air itself has turned pale. The baby stirs beside you, and you both listen for the usual morning sounds: the wind through the thatch, the cartwheels in the lane. Instead, there is only hush. You open the shutters to find the world remade. The lane, the green, the roofs of every cottage, all buried under a heavy white blanket. The air is still the snow, so clean and unbroken, it feels almost wrong to touch it. Even the sound of your husband moving about is different, muted by the thick cover overhead. Snow means both beauty and trouble. It holds the cold close to the bones of the house. It makes the lanes treacherous, the well a longer and harder walk. But it also brings a kind of truce between you and the outside world. Work slows. Voices carry farther. There is time. The baby presses her hands to the glassless shutter frame, staring out at the whiteness. You lift her so she can see farther, the shapes of the chimneys, the neat slopes of the drifts. Her breath clouds against your cheek. Your husband fetches water while you tend the fire. He returns with his boots caked in white, the pail brimming. He shakes the snow from his shoulders before stepping inside, sending tiny flakes spinning into the air. They've not cleared the green yet, he says. It'll be a day or two before the carts can get through. You nod, stirring the pot of porridge. Snow changes all rhythms. After breakfast, you bundle the baby in her cloak and step outside. The snow comes almost to your knees. It squeaks underfoot, each step leaving a clear hollow. Your breath hangs around you like a halo. You see Aldith a few doors down, bending to shovel a path from her door to the lane. She straightens when she notices you raising her spade in greeting. Her cheeks are bright against the white. The village is quieter than ever. No children at play, no dogs roaming. Just the slow, steady work of people clearing paths and checking roofs. Snow is heavy. It can crush a thatch if left too long. Your husband climbs to the eaves with a broom to sweep the drifts away. The baby watches from the doorway, clutching her rattle eyes wide each time a clump falls to the ground with a soft thud. Inside, the air is warm, but carries the faint scent of damp from the melting snow on boots and cloaks. You set a pot of broth to simmer onions, a strip of salted pork, the last of the cabbage. The smell seeps into the rushes, promising heat from within. The baby toddles from hearth to bed, her steps uncertain but determined. You guide her gently, your hands hovering. Snow changes the way you measure the day. There is no sense rushing, no endless list of tasks that can't wait. Instead, there are small things: mending a glove, turning the grain in the bins, telling the baby the old story of the fox who outwitted the farmer. By afternoon, the light is already fading, the snow outside taking on a blue cast. At dusk, you light the rush lamps early. The glow makes the snow outside seem even whiter, as though the world has been reduced to two colors: gold, inside, silver out. Your husband sits by the fire with the baby on his knee, showing her how to drum her hands on the arm of his chair. She laughs, the sound filling the small space like summer for just a moment. That night, the quiet deepens. The snow muffles even the wind. You lie awake, listening to it, the stillness so complete it feels almost sacred. The baby shifts in her sleep, pressing closer to you. You think of the times when snow has been a curse, when food was scarce, when the cold crept into your bones, until you thought you might never be warm again. But tonight, you feel safe enough. The snow on the roof is a weight, yes, but it is also a shield. It begins slowly. At first, you barely notice. The barrels still feel heavy, the bins still full enough. The bread rises, the stew simmers. But then a jar of beans empties, and there's no second jar to replace it. The onions hang fewer from the beams. The salted pork is down to 2 slabs each, smaller than you remembered. This is the way the hungry gap creeps in quiet, polite at first, until it is all you can think about. The baby eats well enough, though you thin her porridge a little more than you used to. She's old enough now for small pieces of bread softened in broth, which she chews with slow concentration. You find yourself watching every bite she takes, not because you begrudge her, but because each one feels counted. Your husband says little about the stores, but you notice he takes smaller helpings at supper. He cuts his bread thinner, serves you before himself. You need the strength, he says, when you try to match his portion. For her, you don't argue. It's easier that way. The snow outside has crusted into ice, making the lanes treacherous. The well path is narrow, worn down by careful steps. You carry the bucket with both hands, the water sloshing against the cold metal. Aldith meets you halfway one morning. She looks thinner, her cheeks sharp above the wool wrapped around her neck. "It'll be another month before the garden yields anything worth eating," she says without greeting. "And even then, it'll be greens and weeds." She says it like a truth, not a complaint. Inside, you make the work stretch to fill the hours. You shell the last of the dried peas, mend the cuffs on your husband's shirt, turn the baby's gown so the worn patches hide in the seams. The fire burns low most of the day to save fuel. You keep the baby near it, wrapped in the blanket from your wedding chest. The quiet is no longer peaceful. It feels hollow. The priest preaches patience, reminding the villagers that the hungry gap is as much a test as the frost. We must endure, he says, for endurance brings us closer to grace. You wonder privately how much grace can be bought by hunger. At night, the cold is sharper. The blanket over the bed feels heavier. The air under it damp with your shared breath. The baby curls tight against you, seeking warmth. You sleep in fits, waking to shift her, to listen to her breathing, to pull the covers back into place. Your dreams are full of food loaves, split open butter, melting on their crusts, apples so ripe, the juice runs down your chin. You wake with your mouth dry. One evening, you boil a pot of broth so thin you can see the bottom. You stir it slowly, watching the flecks of onion drift. The baby drinks hers without complaint. Your husband eats in silence, setting the spoon down carefully between mouthfuls. When the pot is empty, you scrape the sides with a crust of bread, unwilling to waste a drop. The hungry gap is not just in the larder. It's in the faces of your neighbors, in the slow way they walk, in the absence of laughter at the well. It's in the way everyone avoids talking about how long is left until the first shoots push through the thawed soil. It's in the way you measure flour by the pinch milk by the swallow. Still, the days pass. The snow begins to soften at the edges, melting into rivulets that freeze again at night. The sun lingers a little longer each evening, though the air remains cold. You take the baby outside on the brighter days, letting her toddle along the lane. She bends to touch the ice, then the patches of bare earth that have begun to show through. She does not know yet what it means, but you do. The hungry gap will end. It always has, but it always leaves its mark. It begins almost without you noticing. One morning when you open the shutters, the air is not quite as sharp. The snow in the lane is pitted and grey, shrinking back from the wheel ruts. Water trickles from the thatch, tapping into the barrels below. The sound is steady, almost cheerful. You draw in a long breath. It smells faintly of earth. The thaw is slow, but it is certain. Patches of brown grass appear along the edges of the green. The frozen puddles by the well soften, then vanish. The frost that once clung to the doorframe in delicate feathers melts into dark streaks of damp. The baby stands at the doorway, fascinated by the rivulets running down the lane. She squats to pat at the mud, squealing when it squelches between her fingers. You scoop her up before she can put it in her mouth. Thaw means work. The woodpile is lower than you'd hoped, but the need for constant fires begins to lessen. You turn the grain in the bins, checking for damp. You shake out the blankets, hang them in the cool breeze to chase away the smell of smoke and winter. Your husband mends the fence in the small garden, setting the stakes deeper in the softened earth. Soon it will be time to plant. With the thaw comes the smell. It rises from the ground as the snow retreats damp and heavy. You catch it strongest near the far edge of the green, where the earth has been undisturbed for months. Aldith says it's the rot from last autumn's leaves. You nod, but you both know it's more than leaves. The thaw reveals what the snow hid. Some cottages will not open again. Doors sag on broken hinges. Roofs have caved under the weight of the snow. The bare patches in the lane tell you who has not walked there all winter. No one says much about it. The thaw brings life, but it also reminds you of who did not live to see it. Still, there are signs worth holding on to. The geese return to the mill pond, their calls breaking the months of silence. Shoots of green push through the thawing soil near the garden fence. First the weeds, then the wild garlic. The air carries birdsong again, tentative but growing bolder with each day. You show the baby the new shoots, guiding her small hand so she can feel the tender leaves. She tugs one free and grins, not yet knowing what it means to have something fresh. The thaw also brings mud. Thick, clinging, relentless mud. It coats your boots, splashes up your hem, sucks at the cartwheels in the lane. Every trip to the well leaves tracks across the floor, no matter how often you sweep. But even the mud feels alive, messy, exhausting, but alive. It means the earth is waking. One afternoon, Aldith brings a handful of wild sorrel. First greens, she says with a small smile. You add them to the pot with the last of the dried peas. The taste is sharp, almost shocking after months of stored food. You watch the baby chew a leaf. Her expression puzzled at first, then curious. The thaw changes the lights. The sun has warmth in it now, weak but certain. It slants differently through the shutters, pooling gold on the floorboards. You move your work basket to the spot so you can sew with the warmth on your hands. The days are longer, though they end in sudden cold once the sun dips. You light the hearth again in the evenings, but the fire feels less like a necessity, more like a comfort. One night, as you settle the baby into her blanket, you hear frogs calling from somewhere beyond the green. You haven't heard that sound since last spring, and it catches you by surprise. You lie awake a little longer than usual listening. The sound is ragged, unpolished, but it carries the promise that winter has loosened its hold. The thaw does not erase the hungry gap, but it softens it. You can see the work ahead turning the garden soil, mending tools, preparing seed. You can feel the weight of the months behind you. But there is something else now, moving beneath it all. Possibility. The snow is gone from the roof. The earth is open again, and so are you. The first sowing begins before the frost has fully left the ground. It is not a single day, not a grand start, but a slow gathering of signs. The mud no longer clings so fiercely to your boots. The morning ice on the pail melts by midday. The blackbirds sing before you've finished your bread. Your husband says it's time, as if the earth itself has sent him word. The work is deliberate, almost ceremonial. The tools are brought out from the shed spade's hose, the wooden seed box that has been tucked under the bed all winter. You run your hand over its lid, feeling the faint give of the wood. Inside, the seeds are wrapped in scraps of cloth saved from last year's harvest. Some are round and hard like tiny stones. Others are flat, featherlight, almost fragile enough to crumble in your palm. The baby sits on the blanket at the garden's edge watching. She is old enough now to pull herself upright and take steps across the furrows if you don't keep a close eye. You give her a wooden spoon to stir in an empty pot while you and your husband work. The first furrows are cut in straight lines, each one marked with the rhythm of the spade press, turn, lift, drop. The smell of the earth rises rich and damp, a scent you have almost forgotten. It clings to your hands, to your skirts, to the baby's hair when she crawls too close. You begin with the hardier crops: beans, peas, onions. These will bear the chill nights still to come. The seeds scatter into the furrow like a handful of coins into a fountain. You press the soil over them gently, the way you would tuck the baby under her blanket. It is quiet work, though not solemn. Aldith passes with a basket of her own seed potatoes, calling over the fence that she hopes the crows will be lazy this year. The village feels busier now. Every strip in the fields has someone bent over it. Women sowing, men breaking the soil, children chasing off birds. Even the priest walks the boundary with his cloak over his arm, nodding to those he passes. There is no feast for this kind of work, but there is a shared energy, a sense that each handful of seed is an act of faith. At midday, you rest against the fence, the baby in your lap. Your hands are raw from the soil, your nails rimmed in black. You take a piece of oat bread from your bag, softening it in a cup of warm milk for the baby before you eat your own. She chews thoughtfully, her gaze fixed on the patch of earth you have just planted. You wonder what she sees, mud or the promise of something else. Afternoons are for weeding, last year's beds turning the compost, checking the tools for splinters and cracks. Your husband sets stakes for the beans, driving them into the earth with the heel of his boot. You hear the thud, feel it faintly through the soil under your knees. Some evenings after the baby is asleep, you sit by the hearth mending sacks for the harvest you hope will come. The fire is smaller now, the nights less bitter, but you still pull the blanket tight around your shoulders. The talk between you and your husband is of practical things. How much barley to plant, whether to risk another row of onions, how to keep the baby from wandering into the beds once the shoots appear. There is a calm in this part of the year, not the idle calm of winter's waiting, but the steady calm of knowing each day's work fits into the next. You rise, you sow, you mend, you tend. The soil takes what you give it without complaint. Still, you know it will not give everything back. The weather may turn, the pests may come, the yield may falter. Planting is always a gamble. One morning, you wake to find the first green tips pushing through the soil. You call the baby over, holding her hand as she leans down to look. She does not understand what this means, that you are looking at your food for the year, at the line between enough and hunger. She only sees green and she laughs. The first sowing is not finished in a day or even a week. It continues as the weather allows seed after seed, bed after bed. The work is small but endless. You sleep with the smell of earth in your hair. And for the first time in months, you dream of plenty. The bell begins at dawn. Not the steady toll of a funeral, nor the brisk call to mass, but a ringing that swells and fades, as though the air itself is dressed for the occasion. Saints' Day. Even before you open the shutters, you know the village will look different. There will be cloth draped over the church porch, flowers laid at the altar, the priest moving among his flock with a smile in place of his usual sternness. It is a day when the work slows, not stops. There is always something to tend, but slows the rhythm of the fields, giving way to the rhythm of the feast. Your husband will not go to the far pasture today. You will not spend the morning bent over the garden beds. Instead, you dress the baby in her cleanest gown, pulling the wrinkles out with your palms, fastening the ties twice so they will hold. You wear your own better kirtle patched at the hem, but bright in colour. Aldith once told you it's wise to wear red on a saint's day. It keeps the eye from dwelling too much on the wear of the fabric. Outside, the lanes are already stirring. Children run in knots, clutching sprigs of green. Men in their best tunics stand in small circles, talking in low voices. The smell of fresh bread drifts from the bakehouse. You can almost taste the heat of it in the morning air. You pass the mill pond on the way to the church and see a gaggle of geese chasing one another across the thaw-softened bank. Even they seem to know it is not an ordinary day. The church is hung with boughs of evergreen, the scent sharp and resinous. Candles burn in every niche, their flames making the gold threads of the altar cloth glint. The baby's eyes are wide as you carry her up the aisle. She leans out of your arms to watch the flicker of the tapers. The Mass is longer than usual, filled with hymns you have known since girlhood. Your voice blends with the others, the sound rising and falling like the bell this morning. The priest speaks of the saints' trials of patience and endurance rewarded of miracles born from suffering. You notice he chooses examples that could be heard as much about farming as about faith. After the Mass, the green fills. There will be no market today. No carts trading grain for salt or eggs for cloth. Instead, there is bread to share, ale drawn from casks rolled out into the sun, and a spit turning slowly with the only fresh meat you have seen in weeks. You take your place on the grass with Aldith the baby, between you watching the men raise a maypole for the afternoon dancing. Not everyone will dance. Your husband will stand with the others at the ale cask, nodding along to the music but not stepping forward. You may join the circle if the baby naps, if the moment catches you. Children chase one another across the green, their shoes wet with the damp ground. The smell of roasting meat carries on the breeze. The baby chews on a crust you have softened in ale. Her cheeks are flushed with sun and excitement. Saint's Day is a gift, but it is also a reminder. Tomorrow, the fields will need tending again. The weeds will not have stopped growing. The seeds sown last week will still need guarding from the crows. The bread you eat today will be gone by evening, and the barrels will be no fuller for it. But for now, you let yourself be full. As the sun begins to sink, the music slows. The green is littered with trampled grass, empty cups, and the laughter of those who have lingered too long by the ale. You carry the baby home, her head against your shoulder, her breath warm through the cloth of your kirtle. At home, you lay her down and sit by the window for a while, listening to the faint hum of voices still out on the lane. The bell rings once more before the night, a single deep note that feels like the closing of a door. Saint's Day has passed. Tomorrow will be the same as before, and that you know is the point. The air warns you before the sky does. It is heavy close, as though each breath you take is weighed down with the scent of crushed grass, and something sharper zone, though you do not know the word for it. The baby fusses on your hip, restless and sticky in the heat. Even the hens scratch lazily in the dust, their wings drooping. By midday, the light has turned strange. The green of the fields deepened to something almost unnatural. The clouds gather in great folds, pressing low enough to feel. Your husband is in the far field, turning the hay before it can spoil in the damp that is coming. You carry water to him, the air so thick that your skin is damp before you reach the gate. He takes the cup from you and drains it in one swallow, his eyes fixed on the dark line building along the horizon. "Well, not beat it," he says, handing back the cup. "Best you get inside." You make it halfway down the lane before the wind begins. It comes sudden, rattling the hedges and whipping your skirts around your legs. The baby clutches your shoulder, burying her face against your neck. Dust stings your eyes. The leaves above you twist to show their pale undersides. By the time you reach the garden, the first fat drops of rain are falling, warm, heavy, and spaced just far enough apart to tease at what's coming. Inside, you set the baby down and move quickly to shutter the windows. The air in the house grows darker. The fire a faint glow against the deepening gloom. Outside, the rain begins in earnest, drumming on the thatch so hard you can feel the vibrations in your feet. The storm does not build politely, it falls upon you all at once. Lightning cracks so bright you see the bones of the room in its flash. The rafters, the iron nails, the pale oval of the baby's startled face. The thunder follows at once, rolling through the earth, rattling the crockery on the shelf. The baby cries, and you gather her close, rocking her against the steady pounding of the rain. Through the narrow gap of the shutters, you see the lane transformed into a stream. The garden beds glisten with water, the bean poles swaying dangerously. You think of the seeds, the shoots, the tender leaves beaten down under this onslaught. There is nothing you can do but wait. Your husband arrives in the thick of it, soaked through hair plastered to his forehead. He shuts the door hard against the wind, setting down the bundle of tools he has carried in from the field. "They'll not dry now," he says, meaning the hay. "We'll have to turn it again after." You pass him a cloth to dry his face, and for a moment, you both simply stand listening to the roar on the roof. The storm seems endless. The baby eventually drifts into a fretful sleep, her small body twitching at each crack of thunder. You keep your hand on her back, feeling the rise and fall of her breath. Your husband moves from window to window, checking for leaks. The smell in the house changes, the smoke from the dampened fire, the wet wool of your husband's tunic, the sharp green of crushed leaves blown in through the door. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it breaks. The rain slackens. The thunder moves farther off its growl, low and tired. The light returns washed and pale, glancing off the pools in the lane. You open the shutters to let in the new air cool clean and carrying the scent of earth. Outside, the damage is clear. The garden is battered. Some of the bean poles snapped. The young onions flattened. The far edge of the green is scattered with branches. But the well is brimming, the barrels full, and the air has lost its heavy weight. Your husband will mend what he can tomorrow. You will replant where you must. The storm is over. That night, the baby sleeps deeply, the cool air wrapping the house in quiet. You lie awake a while, listening to the distant trickle of water from the eaves and thinking how storms come without asking and leave the same way. The wheat turns before the rest of the fields. First, it is green, shot through with gold. Then the gold deepens until under the full sun, the heads sway like a single shining sheet. When the wind moves through it, you think of the ripples on the mill pond, slow and certain. The first cut is not for you, not yet. Lammas comes at the turning of July into August, the feast of the first loaf. It is the day the first grain is milled, the first bread baked, the first thanks given for what the fields have promised. But promise is not the same as plenty. You know that too well. The rest of the crop still stands waiting to be brought in before the weather turns. A summer storm now could ruin more than the hay. The village gathers early on Lammas morning. The men carry the sheaves from the field to the mill, the sound of the scythes still in your ears from the day before. The miller's stones turn slow but steady, grinding the first grain of the season. You can smell the flour, even from outside, the warm, dusty scent that settles deep in your throat. The baking is done at the common oven. You and Aldith arrive with your baskets, each holding a small, precious lump of dough. The oven is already lit, the heat shimmering in the air around it. The baker's wife takes each lump, shaping it quickly, with her hands scoring the tops before sliding them into the dark mouth of the oven. Your loaf is round simple, marked with a single cross. While you wait, the green begins to fill. Lammas is not as grand as Saint's Day, but it is no ordinary gathering either. There will be music before the day is out, and ale and children running between the stalls where a few merchants have set up to sell ribbons, combs, and sugared nuts. But first, the bread. When the loaves are drawn from the oven, the smell fills everything. It is richer than the smell of porridge, sharper than the scent of oatcakes. You cradle the loaf in both hands, its crust still warm, the cross on top baked deep into the golden skin. You do not eat yet. the first piece must be blessed. In the church, the loaves are laid out in rows along the altar. The priest moves among them, swinging the censer, the thin curl of incense mingling with the smell of the bread. His words are low, the Latin rising and falling like the breath of the whole room. When he is done, each family takes their loaf back blessed, now ready to be broken. You sit on the grass outside the church with your husband and the baby. The bread tears easily, the crust giving way to soft, hot crumb. You put the first piece in your mouth, the warmth spreading through you, in a way that feels almost dangerous after so many months of careful eating. The baby chews her bit with slow, thoughtful bites, her eyes half closed, as if she too understands the gift of it. Lammas bread is meant to remind you of what the year has brought and of what still depends on the weeks to come. The first loaf is a promise, not a guarantee. Tomorrow the fields will still need cutting, the sheaves still need binding, the weather still needs watching. But for today, you let yourself eat without counting. In the afternoon there is dancing. The music is light, the fiddles quick, and though your husband does not join, he watches as you take a few turns in the circle. The baby sits with him, banging her wooden spoon against the grass in time to nothing at all. As the sun lowers, the village begins to scatter. Some take the last of the ale, some carry their half-eaten loaves home, wrapped in cloth. You walk back slowly, the baby balanced on your hip, the taste of warm bread still on your tongue. That night, you tuck the heel of the Lammas loaf into a cloth and place it on the shelf. Old custom says a piece of the first loaf should be kept until the harvest is in. It's meant to keep hunger away, though you suspect it's more to keep the memory of plenty alive. You lie down with the baby beside you, listening to the crickets outside and the faint hum of voices still drifting from the green. Tomorrow will be for work again, but tonight you sleep on the strength of bread. It begins in the half-light before the mist has lifted from the fields. Your husband is already out, sharpening the scythe with slow, measured strokes. The sound carries across the still air, bright against the soft rustle of the stalks. The baby stirs in her cradle, sensing the change in the house. Today is for finishing. The wheat has stood long enough, and the weather has held. Each day without rain has been a blessing, but each day also risks the grain drying too far, falling to the ground before you can take it. The village knows this. The fields are full from first light men with scythes, women with sickles, children stooping to gather the fallen heads. The smell of cut stalks is thick and sweet, filling the nose until you taste it. You tie your hair back and take your place. The sickle fits easily into your hand, the motion familiar from seasons past. Cut, gather, lay. Cut, gather, lay. The rhythm settles in your shoulders, in your spine, until it feels like the only movement you have ever known. The baby stays with Aldith at the field's edge, shaded by the lean-to of a cart. She watches with wide eyes, clutching a length of straw as though it were treasure. Now and then you wave to her, and she waves back with the solemnity of one who does not yet understand the weight of the work. By midday, the sun is high and the field looks half its size. The stacks rise in neat rows, each bound sheaf standing like a soldier at attention. You drink water from the pail, the metal cup cool against your lips, and wipe the sweat from your forehead with the edge of your sleeve. Your hands are rough, the skin lined with dust and chaff. After the break, you move to the gleaning, walking slowly through the stubble to collect what has been missed. Every head of grain matters. In the lean years, gleaning can mean the difference between a winter of hunger and a winter of enough. You think of the heel of Lammas bread still on the shelf at home, and you work a little faster. The afternoon is quieter. The children tire their voices, fading to murmurs. The men move steadily, their scythes catching the low light as the day wears on. You feel the ache building in your shoulders, but there is no question of stopping. The field will not wait. By the time the last row falls, the sun is low enough to cast long shadows across the stubble. The air is cooler, the heat of the day retreating into the hedgerows. You stand for a moment looking over what you have done, the neat stacks, the swept rows, the earth bare and clean. It is not just a field now, it is the year's work gathered. The sheaves are loaded onto carts, the wheels creaking under the weight. Some will go to the mill tomorrow, some to the barn for threshing later. The dust rises in soft clouds as the carts roll down the lane. You walk home with the baby on your hip, her head resting against your shoulder. She smells of straw and sun. That evening the house is quiet. The tools are set aside. The baskets are empty. You sit by the hearth with a cup of small ale, your husband beside you, the baby asleep in her cradle. Outside, the first stars prick the darkening sky. The last harvest means the year is turning again. There will be threshing, winnowing, storing. There will be mending and preparing for winter. But for tonight, the work is done. You think of the field in winter frost, crisp on the stubble, and of the green that will come again. You think of how the year's labor is both ending and beginning in the same breath. You bank the fire, close the shutters, and lie down. The smell of cut grain clings to your hair. Your hands are sore, but your heart is full. The last harvest is in.